Last year we tested the Golf Plus VR on the Oculus Quest 2. Now we've got our hands on the brand new Oculus Quest 3 with its improved resolution, processor, and features. But the question we have is, does the Quest 3 provide an overall better VR golf experience? And is it worth the increased price tag? That's what we intend to find out. Okay, so the Quest 2 was rolled out in 2020, making it about 3 years old technology at this point. So Meta has recently rolled out the brand new Quest 3, which does come with some new features, but like I said earlier, also an increased price tag. So if we put that feature set side by side, you can see that the Quest 3 has an improved resolution, a second generation processor, and increased RAM. Now, if we put that in layman's terms, effectively what that's like getting is a faster computer with a better screen. Now, the Quest 2 is still for sale, so some of you may be deciding between the two of which one you want to purchase. Another thing to consider as part of that is that the Quest 3 has a sleeker, more well-balanced design with an improved head strap, which it might not seem like a big deal, but if you're wearing this thing for an hour or two while you're playing a round or multiple rounds of golf, it really does make a difference having something more comfortable on your face. And the best way that I can describe this here is that the Quest 3 just feels a little bit more form fit to your face. I find that the Quest 2 sticks out a bit further, and that makes it a little bit less balanced. You feel a little bit heavier above the nose, and wearing it gets a little bit tiring after a while. By comparison, the Quest 3 feels a little bit more balanced. The weight is more evenly distributed around your head, and you can see that it doesn't quite stick out as far towards the nose. Now, when you look at them side by side, I think one of the clearest differences are the cameras on front of the Quest 3. And what that allows it to do is not only be a VR headset, but also an AR headset, augmented reality. Now, there have been countless videos out there detailing some of the features of the AR in the Quest 3, and to be honest with you, it doesn't really come into play with VR golf, so it's a little bit beyond the scope of this video, and you could find out some more information about that if you just poke around. But I will say, if you are deciding between the two for use of things other than VR golf, it's definitely something to consider. In fact, my kids have even been using this to help learn the piano. So again, it might just justify the slightly higher price tag, just something to consider, again, if you are using this for more than golf. But AR aside, I know why you guys are here. You want us to get into the golf. So we're gonna dive into that in just a second. But of course, first, we do have to talk about the price difference between these two headsets. Now, starting with that Quest 2, it is still available for purchase. It has not yet been phased out, and the price tag is actually very reasonable for anybody who's first getting into VR. It comes in at around $200. I say around because both headsets have some options of additional storage, but the base model comes in at around 200 bucks. The Quest 3, on the other hand, being the newer model with more features, is a bit more expensive. This one starts at around 500 bucks. So overall, still not too expensive if you think about what you're getting, but there is a $300 difference you're gonna have to consider between these two. Now, the good news is that the VR golf game that we're gonna be diving into in just a second does work on either headset. So if you do opt for the slightly older equipment, the Quest 2, save a couple $100. You don't have to worry about any of those gameplay features being missing. So what I mean by that are things like multiplayer or the courses that are available. All of those are available equally in both headsets. But of course, there are some differences going back to using that hardware like we mentioned before, the faster processor, the better resolution that are in the Quest 3. But it really does come down to that decision of what you want and what your budget is. So let's now dive into the gameplay for both headsets, compare them side by side, and then we'll talk about which one we would recommend for different users. Okay, so I've spent some considerable time in both headsets comparing the two, and the two things that we're really gonna focus on here are the graphics and the motion tracking, because of course that is what makes the swing feel more realistic. It really comes down to smoothness. Now, to keep this test as fair and uniform as possible, we're gonna be using the exact same club attachment handle for both of the two headsets. Now this one happens to be the Driver Elite from Deadeye VR. What we really like about this, what's so great about it, is that it's compatible with both the Quest 2 and Quest 3 controllers, so it's easier to swap between the two. And if you watched our previous videos on Golf VR, you know that we've said it before, some sort of golf handle attachment like this one really is imperative to make the experience feel real. Yes, of course, you can just swing the controller with one hand or try to put two hands on it, but to be honest, it's a night and day difference when you've got something that feels like a real golf club in your hands, and this is what really makes the whole experience feel so much more like real golf. So we do think that having something like this is very important. And to be honest, in the little testing that we've been doing so far, we're loving this brand new Driver Elite from Deadeye VR. Just love all the features that come with it, the balance, and just how it feels in the hands. Won't get into too much detail on that right now because we did just get our hands on it. We are going to be doing a full review of this on the channel really soon, so make sure you subscribe. But so far, so good with this. But now, of course, what you've been waiting for, let's jump into the gameplay and show you some of the differences between the Quest 2 and the Quest 3. As you can see standing on the 17th tee box here at TPC Sawgrass, both really look great. But as you're in the goggles, you can start to see how the game takes advantage of the Quest 3's resolution improvement just a bit. Kind of immediately where you can spot some of that difference is in the lines and letters around the signage. The higher resolution of the Quest 3, it's just a bit more crisp, where the Quest 2 is still quite good, but a bit blurrier in a side-by-side comparison. But here, taking a swing, again, the overall experience that I'm finding between the Quest 2 and Quest 3 is really more similar than it is different. Here again, there's a slight improvement in what I would call the overall smoothness of the motion in the Quest 3, but if I'm being honest, I don't think I would even notice it if I wasn't playing the two games side by side. The Quest 2 is still very smooth, but like we mentioned earlier, the Quest 3 does have a little bit more processing power, which I'm sure helps smooth out some of those subtle motions. Now, it's worth noting that on both the Quest 2 and Quest 3, we've got the V2 physics option selected. Golf Plus claims that this new physics was trained on over 200,000 real-world golf shots, and it's their most accurate yet. The good news is, like a lot of the features that we mentioned earlier, the Physics V2 option is available on both the Quest 2 and Quest 3 headsets, so we've got it turned on here for all of our tests. Now, back on those graphics for just a minute, you can see the comparison of the first hole here at Kapalua. Again, both look great, but there is a slight improvement in the overall resolution and details in the Quest 3. Mainly, again, the detail difference can be seen best in little details like tree branches and blades of grass. Speaking of the resolution, take a look at these two side-by-side screen captures from the two games standing in the exact same spot on the first hole at TPC Sawgrass. And I'm wondering, can you spot the difference? I'll give you a second to see if you can tell which one is which. All right, if you guessed right, you've got a pretty sharp eye, and I think you're starting to see what I mean, but the graphics are really great in both of these devices, and you only really spot the difference when you start to put them side by side. It's very clear that the game is taking advantage of the higher resolution that you get from the Quest 3, and where you really spot that is in the finer details. And although I would not consider this a significant leap forward, again, what it boils down to is these subtle refinements are what make it a slightly more immersive, slightly more realistic experience, and honestly, it kind of tricks your eye and your brain into thinking it's more real when everything is slightly more detailed and a little bit smoother. Taking a look at one more quick example, if we head over to the driving range, you can start to see the greater detail in the Quest 3, especially in areas like text, lines, and other fine details. Again, when we put them side by side, where you can really spot the difference is in how the lines of the Quest 2 just appear a bit more jagged, whereas everything is a bit cleaner and straighter and smoother on the Quest 3. As for the actual game physics and motion, what I would say, if anything, is I would describe the Quest 3 as being just a little bit more true to life, especially when it comes to delicate shots around and on the greens. But again, we're being really picky here. Obviously, we're really diving into some of those pixels and looking really closely and jumping back and forth between the devices. But what I will say is that there's not a huge, very obvious, discernible difference between the way that the swing performs on one device versus the other. Again, we're really looking at the fine tuning here. Really, the only word that I can keep coming back to is that the Quest 3 just feels a little bit smoother. And some of that could just be from a visual perception that I'm getting, again, from some of those lines and other things that we zoomed in on earlier, just being a little bit straighter, a little bit more detail in those fine areas. And that could be just tricking my brain into feeling like it's a little bit smoother. But again, it's not what I would call a significant difference. And generally speaking, the realistic overall feeling of VR golf that we get in this Golf Plus game is really fantastic in both headsets. And that's really what's made the game so popular over the last year or two. All right, so we've been through some of the gameplay, and now the question becomes, which one do we recommend you buying? Whether you're buying for the first time or if you already own the Quest 2 and you're thinking about upgrading to the Quest 3. One thing I'll say, and I did mention this earlier, that I think if you're brand new to VR, you're really looking to get in on an entry level and you're on a budget, then it's hard to beat the Quest 2. As you saw, it still performs fantastically, and that price around $200 honestly is really hard to beat. So this is a great starting point if you're brand new to VR and focused primarily on just VR itself. Now, if you're more into VR or you plan to be in the future, or if you're thinking about using the headset for something more than just playing Golf Plus, then I definitely think it's worth giving a look to the Quest 3. The Quest 3 I find is just a better overall experience. It's more comfortable to wear, it's more user-friendly, and really it comes with more features. Keep in mind, the addition of those cameras on the front make the Quest 3 just a great headset for both VR and AR augmented reality program, whereas the Quest 2 really limits you only to VR. So here's the final verdict. Golf Plus is a fantastic game that just seems to be getting better and better as they roll out more courses and more gameplay and multiplayer options. And while it's obviously never going to replace playing a real round of golf, it's a really fun way to pass the time and scratch that golf itch when you can't get outdoors. All right, so hopefully our little comparison here has helped you if you're deciding between the two or thinking about upgrading. Like I keep saying, the good news is you're still gonna get a fantastic experience with the Golf Plus VR game, no matter which headset you choose. But as we saw, the Quest 3, and it's obvious, it is a newer unit, it's got more features, it does perform a little bit better. But let us know which one you guys decide to go with in the comments. We'd love to hear your feedback, and we'll see you in the next video.